He didn't take the calm line this time. All season, Fred Vasseur had been the team principal, who absorbed penalty after penalty with a shrug and a diplomatic quote for the cameras. And then, after Hungary, that stopped. What he said next is the reason this story has moved from frustration to something the FIA can no longer treat as noise. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what pushed him there, why Lewis Hamilton's own words over team radio have stopped sounding like a driver venting and started sounding like a man reading out evidence, and why a 50-point championship gap might not be quite what it looks like on paper right now. Keep that number in mind, it comes back. Here is the fact, told flat, without any of the noise around it. Since the start of this season, Hamilton has picked up 6 separate penalties now sitting under review. 2 of them landed in the same race weekend, at his home Grand Prix, Silverstone. A false start call, based on a tire rotation measured at 42 millimeters, something Ferrari's own sensors did not register as movement at all, and a yellow flag infringement at turn 9, where the warning light on his own steering wheel arrived late, after he had already entered the zone it was meant to warn him about. Then Hungary, where a pit lane speeding penalty was applied over a margin of 1/10 of a kilometer per hour. Ferrari's telemetry read 80.6, the FIA's own data read 80.5. The limit was 80. Somewhere in a gap smaller than most stopwatches can meaningfully register, a penalty was applied that now sits inside a championship fight. If you want the stories the paddock doesn't put in a press release, subscribe right now and tell me in the comments which country you're watching from, because what Vasseur said next lands differently depending on where you're sitting. This is not a driver complaining into a microphone after a bad result. This is the team principal of Ferrari, a man who has spent this entire season publicly accepting stewards' decisions one at a time without pushing back, finally saying the part out loud that everyone in the garage had been thinking privately. Asked directly whether the false start penalty was his driver's mistake, he didn't hedge. "You are a bit harsh," he told the media, rejecting the framing outright. He didn't stop there. He explained on the record that the sensors said the car never moved, and that whatever a camera could technically pick out on the tire was a fraction of an inch nobody would call a jump start in any other context. That is not a man managing optics. That is a man who has run out of patience for decisions his own data contradicts. So take the official version apart, piece by piece. Did Ferrari's sensors detect the car moving before the lights went out? No. Did the stewards still apply a 5-second penalty? Yes. Was the justification a tire rotation of 42 millimeters, spotted only after a second look at onboard footage? Yes. Would that measurement, on its own, be enough to convict a driver of jumping the start in any other governing body's regulations? Nobody in Formula One's technical press has said yes to that question yet. And on the yellow flag call at turn 9, the warning that should have told Hamilton to slow down did not appear until after he had already entered the zone. The stewards ruled that, once it appeared, he hadn't reacted quickly enough. In both cases, from the same race weekend, the equipment meant to justify the penalty either failed to register anything or delivered its signal too late to matter. Now, put 2 moments next to each other and read them with the exact same flat tone, because that's the only way the pattern becomes visible instead of just felt. In Hungary, Vasseur accepted the penalty over 1/10 of a kilometer per hour, with a line that has since been repeated across the paddock. When the weekend is going in the wrong direction, 1/10 of a kilometer per hour is a big delta, and we took the penalty. Read that next to what came out later about Monaco earlier this same season, where the physical pit entry barrier used to measure speed had been shifted by 77 centimeters, without anyone catching it before the fact. Neither detail proves anything about Hungary specifically on its own. But side by side, they ask a question nobody in that garage can honestly avoid. If one measurement line moved without detection for months, what real confidence does anyone have that every other reading this season, every other 1/10 of a kilometer per hour, was taken from the spot it was supposed to be taken from? And if you're not subscribed yet, this is exactly the kind of story you'll want to be here for the next time it happens, because with 12 races still left, it will. So here's the impossible position this actually puts a driver in. Do you push back publicly on every marginal call and risk looking like you can't accept a decision? Or do you accept 6 of them quietly, one at a time, and let a pattern build in silence until someone else notices it for you? Hamilton chose the second path for most of the season. Listen to what he actually said over team radio in Hungary. Not a complaint. Handing out penalties like crazy, he told his engineer. And then after the race, something sharper. Every opportunity that I give those stewards, every single time they give me a penalty, Put that next to the detail about Monaco's shifted timing line, and it stops sounding like a driver making excuses. It starts sounding like a man who may have understood the shape of this before anyone else did. Here's what the numbers actually cost in terms that matter more than a stopwatch reading. That 5-second penalty at Silverstone was served standing still, before a mechanic had touched the car. Remove it, and the gap at the flag isn't what the result sheet says it is. Now widen that across all 6 incidents currently under review, in a title fight where Hamilton sits 50 points behind Kimi Antonelli. 50 points looks like a wall. Take out even 2 or 3 of these penalties, recalculate the positions he would have held without them, and it stops looking like a wall and starts looking like a gap that's still closable. Go back further, because Vasseur said something months before the Monaco detail ever became public, and it reads completely differently now. After the false start penalty, long before anyone outside the team had heard the words timing line discrepancy, he described the pressure building on his driver as small stone after small stone. At the time, it sounded like a man accepting bad luck with as much composure as he could manage. Knowing what came out since, it reads like someone who already suspected the stones weren't falling by accident. A lot of you in the comments under the last video asked whether one faulty sensor could really cost a championship. Here's the honest answer forming in real time, and it isn't a clean yes or no. Zoom out past Hamilton for a second because this is where the story stops being a Ferrari problem. Modern stewarding leans harder every season on timing systems, sensors, and measurements down to fractions of a centimeter. The panel judging these incidents rotates from race to race, regulations get adjusted mid-season, and underneath all of that sits physical infrastructure that, at least once this year, moved by 77 centimeters without anyone catching it before a car ever crossed that line. When the equipment measuring an offense hasn't been checked with the same rigor as the offense itself, the problem isn't isolated to one driver having a rough year. It's a question about the standard applied to every car on the grid. To be fair to the other side of this, because the strongest version of this video has to include it, there's an argument that holds up on its own. Margins in Formula 1 have always been unforgiving. And if the limit is 80 kilometers per hour, 80.1 is over it, no matter how small that feels standing in the garage. Rules exist precisely so nobody gets to argue their way around a number after the fact. That's a defensible position. It's also not the one that survives sitting next to a timing line that has already been proven wrong once. What comes next is the part nobody at the FIA wanted said publicly. Before I give it to you, subscribe, because this story has a second half, and it's going to land within days, not weeks. Would this penalty exist at all if the equipment measuring it had been checked before the season started? Nothing in the written reasoning says it would have been caught either way. That's not proven. And I'm not going to pretend that it is. It's simply the question anyone watching this is entitled to keep asking out loud until someone answers it. Here's the verdict. This was never really a story about a driver losing his composure. Vasseur didn't explode because Hamilton had a bad weekend. He said what he said because he watched 6 separate decisions, spread across an entire season, get laid next to a timing line that had physically moved without anyone noticing, and realized the pattern he'd been accepting quietly might not have been random at all. What's still genuinely open is this. Nobody has confirmed whether the other 5 penalties trace back to the same kind of measurement error found at Monaco. Nobody has said whether the FIA intends to review them. That's not something this video is going to pretend to know. That's simply where the file stands right now. So tell me directly, if flawed equipment genuinely cost a driver championship points, does the FIA owe him a review? Or does a penalty stand no matter what comes out afterward? Say which one you believe because the comments are the courtroom on this one. Zandvoort is next, and it's the first race since this timing detail became public. Whatever gets said or doesn't get said, before those cars turn a wheel, there will tell you whether this was a one-time correction or the start of a much longer argument about who gets to trust the numbers on the screen. Subscribe now, because the moment the FIA responds, whichever way they respond, I'm covering it before anyone else does. Like this video if you think Vasseur was right to stop staying quiet. And until the next one.